In relationships, you're supposed to trust each other, right? You're supposed to feel like you're part of something safe and solid, built on mutual understanding and commitment. That's how it had always felt with Hannah, or at least that's how I thought it had been. I remember a time when I would have trusted her with anything. But recently, there were these small, almost invisible cracks I couldn't ignore. Little things like quick glances at her phone she didn't want me to notice, or plans she seemed hesitant to fully explain. The girls' trip was the first real alarm bell. It was supposed to be a weekend getaway with two of her closest friends, Lisa and Claire. They'd done it before someplace with a spa, maybe a little wine tasting, then back home by Sunday. When she first brought it up, it felt casual, just Hannah mentioning some quality time with her girls, and I didn't think much of it. But this time it came with a strange evasiveness that immediately made me pause. I still remember the way she said it. We were watching TV, some mindless reality show, and she just slipped it in like it was nothing. "Oh, I'm going away for the weekend with Lisa and Claire. It's a little surprise we've been planning for each other, girls' time." Her eyes stayed on the TV, though, like she didn't really want to meet my gaze when she said it. Something felt off, but I didn't want to be paranoid. "That's cool. You guys planning anything special?" She shrugged. "Just a little wine, some spa time. I'll send you photos." In the past, she would have excitedly shown me the place online or talked about the specific spa treatments she was looking forward to. This time, she didn't. She didn't even give me the name of the place. Maybe I was reading into things too much, but when she mentioned it the next night, she said something different about the location, a little detail that didn't match the first time she'd mentioned it. I brushed it off. People forget details, right? But then I overheard her on the phone. She was in the kitchen, just around the corner, and I was about to go in to grab some water when I caught part of the conversation. She wasn't talking to Lisa or Claire. I couldn't make out the voice, but I heard her laugh soft, in a way she hadn't with me in a while. She was whispering, her words low, but her tone was unmistakable, like there was some secret she was sharing with the person on the other end of the line. Then she said, "I'll be thinking about you," and I froze. Thinking about who? I could feel my stomach twist, but I forced myself to walk away. Maybe it was innocent, a friend, or someone she was just being polite with. But my mind was already spiraling, coming up with a dozen explanations and finding none of them comforting. I tried to shake it off. She was probably just excited about the weekend, looking forward to unwinding with her friends. But the way she was acting, it gnawed at me. I told myself I was being unfair, that I was bringing my own insecurities into this. But every time I looked at her, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she wasn't telling me. Then came Friday night. She packed her bag with a strange carefulness, almost methodical, and gave me a quick hug before she left. She barely looked at me, just a quick peck on the cheek, a "love you," and she was out the door. I stood there, my arms still half open, watching her pull out of the driveway. I wanted to believe she was exactly where she said she'd be. But deep down, I felt the doubt clawing its way up. 3 hours later, I couldn't take it anymore. I tried calling her, just to hear her voice, to reassure myself that everything was fine. But she didn't pick up. I sent a text, something casual: "Hope you're having fun. Miss you." I watched as the little delivered symbol sat there. No read receipt, no response. Another hour passed. Then 2. My mind was racing. Every instinct screamed at me to ignore it, to let it go. But my hands moved on their own, finding the receipt she'd carelessly left on the kitchen counter earlier that day. Her booking information for the hotel was right there, along with the name of the resort. I stared at it, trying to convince myself that this was crossing a line. I didn't need to check up on her. I didn't need to know. But some part of me, something primal, refused to let it go. So I made a choice. Maybe one that, in hindsight, I'd regret. But at that moment, I knew I had to see for myself. I threw a bag together, booked the last room they had available, and drove through the night, feeling the weight of every mile between me and the truth. When I arrived, it was barely dawn. The resort was beautiful, a picture-perfect place that felt worlds away from the turmoil inside me. I checked in, barely listening to the receptionist as she handed me a key card and pointed me to my room. Everything felt surreal, like I was moving in slow motion. Then, as I walked through the lobby, I saw her. She was across the room, laughing softly with someone, a guy I'd never seen before. Her hand was on his arm, fingers grazing his sleeve as she leaned in, her body language too familiar, too comfortable. It felt like a punch to the gut. I stood there, frozen, watching her, my mind trying to process what I was seeing. The girl I loved, the one who'd whispered "love you" only hours ago, was here with someone else. and suddenly every doubt, every suspicion I'd forced myself to ignore, came crashing down. My girlfriend had lied about the girls' trip, and now I was here, face to face with her betrayal. I'm not sure how long I stood there in the lobby, my legs frozen, my mind racing in circles around the same disorienting truth she'd lied so deeply, so completely, that the very person I thought I knew had somehow managed to hide an entire side of herself from me. And here she was, leaning into another man's touch. The way she laughed with him, it had a softness, an ease that felt painfully familiar. It was the same laugh she'd shared with me. My mind fought to find an explanation, any way this might be innocent, some rational reason why she'd lied. But no matter how I looked at it, the scene in front of me was like a terrible puzzle I couldn't put together. She wasn't on a girls' trip. She was here with him. I was too far to hear their words, but I could read her body language as though she were standing right beside me. She was playful, teasing almost, her fingers drifting along his arm, and his hand was resting lightly on her back. There was an intimacy there, a familiarity that tore into me like glass. She didn't just know him, she trusted him. And then a moment later he pulled her closer, and she didn't resist. Her head tipped forward as if she were about to rest it on his shoulder, and in that instant, something snapped inside me. I turned and walked briskly down the hallway before they could see me, feeling my breath come too quickly, my pulse racing. I needed air, distance, anything to stop the wave of anger and humiliation boiling under my skin. How had it come to this? How had I been so blind? I found myself outside, pacing back and forth in the small, decorative garden area beside the lobby, staring at the carefully manicured hedges as if they held the answers. A hollow, painful laugh escaped me. I'd come here with the hope that maybe somehow I was wrong, that I was letting paranoia get the better of me, but now I was here, watching her lie unfold in real time. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, opening our last conversation. I read over her message from the night before. I love you. I'll be back Sunday, and we'll do something fun, okay? Just wait for me. The irony of those words hit me hard. She'd sent me that text while planning to be in another man's arms. How could she lie to my face, night after night? I felt torn between barging back inside and calling her out on the spot, forcing her to explain herself in the middle of that lobby, or just walking away from this nightmare entirely. But no part of me was ready to leave yet, not without some answers. So I went back in, slowly this time. The lobby was quieter, nearly empty now, and I saw that they'd moved outside to a terrace overlooking the hotel's pool. I watched them from a safe distance, concealed by the lobby's glass doors. They were seated at a table now, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass as they talked. Her eyes sparkled with a lightness I hadn't seen in her for months. And I could finally see his face. He was in his 30s, older than me, well-dressed with a relaxed, self-assured smile that seemed to ease her in a way I no longer could. They shared an ease that was unmistakable, as if they'd done this many times before. And then it dawned on me, horrifying and unignorable, this wasn't a fling. She hadn't met him here by chance. This was deliberate. She'd planned this, lied to me, and come here for him. My mind scrambled with questions. Who was this guy? How long had it been going on? I tried to imagine how she'd orchestrated this, lying so easily about her girl's trip, spinning this false story with her friends as her alibi. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I couldn't watch anymore. I took a few deep breaths and moved back toward my room, my hands clenching into fists as I tried to think straight. I knew what I had to do, though the idea made my stomach churn. I wasn't leaving without confronting her. I needed to hear her say it, to see her face when she admitted the truth. That evening I waited, counting down the hours as I paced the floor, unable to rest. It was just past 10 when I saw her walking alone through the hallway toward her room, dressed in a casual evening dress that seemed almost too perfect, too deliberate. Her eyes looked thoughtful, distracted even, and I realized she hadn't noticed me. Hannah, my voice was low, steady, too calm for the chaos raging inside me. She stopped mid-step, her eyes widening as she looked up at me. What? What are you doing here? She stammered, the shock visible in every line of her face. Her hand tightened around the strap of her bag, as if holding onto it for support. What am I doing here? I echoed, feeling the anger begin to edge into my voice. I could ask you the same question, but I think we both already know the answer. Her mouth opened and closed, struggling to find words to come up with an excuse, but I could see the defeat in her eyes. She knew she couldn't explain this away. Look. She trailed off, glancing down the hallway, avoiding my gaze. I didn't want you to find out like this. Find out what, Hannah, I demanded, my voice rising as the frustration I'd bottled up for hours came spilling out. That you lied to me? That you've been seeing someone else behind my back? Please, just keep your voice down, she whispered, eyes darting around as if worried someone would see. Why? Embarrassed, I shot back, feeling the bitterness in my words. You should be. I trusted you, Hannah. I believed you when you said you loved me. A silence fell between us, heavy and suffocating. She looked at me, her face a mix of guilt and something else, something almost resigned. I couldn't believe how calm she looked, like she'd been preparing for this moment. I didn't want to hurt you, she said softly, her voice barely audible. I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how. So lying to me, coming here with him, that was better, I asked, my voice trembling with a hurt I could no longer hide. She flinched, as if the weight of my words had finally hit her, but she quickly masked it with a hard look, a kind of steely resolve I hadn't seen before. It's not as simple as you think, she replied, a hint of defiance creeping into her tone. You think I wanted this? That I wanted things to get this far? You're not blameless here, you know. Her words stung, each one sharper than the last. What are you talking about? I asked, genuinely thrown. I've been nothing but loyal to you, Hannah. I've been here supporting you, loving you. And maybe that was part of the problem, she interrupted, her voice suddenly harsh. You were always there, always watching, always asking questions. You never gave me any space to breathe. The words cut through me, leaving me speechless. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about her betrayal, this was about something that had been festering between us, growing quietly until it had exploded in the worst possible way. So what, I whispered, struggling to keep my voice steady. You decided to lie to my face, go behind my back, and find someone else. Hannah looked away, her jaw tight. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, I didn't plan for it to happen. But he makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in a long time. The honesty in her voice was like a knife twisting in my gut. I wanted to yell, to throw something, to make her feel even an ounce of the pain she was causing me. But instead, I just stood there, feeling my entire world crumble around me. I could feel the weight of her words bearing down on me. He makes me feel alive. Those words hung between us like smoke, choking and impossible to ignore. She didn't look at me, her gaze fixed on the ground, as if she knew that what she'd just said had landed like a blow. It felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room, leaving me stranded with nothing but her words to haunt me. I searched her face, looking for any trace of regret, any hint that she still felt something for me, anything that would make this whole thing less unbearable. But what I saw there wasn't shame, it was frustration, something brittle and tired. How long has this been going on? My voice sounded foreign, hollow. She bit her lip, hesitating. A few months, she admitted quietly. It wasn't supposed to be. It wasn't supposed to turn into this. I took a step back, trying to let the reality sink in. So, what? You've been carrying on this, whatever it is, for months, lying to my face every day. It's not that simple, she insisted, her voice rising defensively. You act like I'm some kind of villain, but you have no idea what this has been like for me. I scoffed, incredulous. For you? Do you even realize what you're saying, Hannah? I trusted you. I thought you cared about me. I do care about you, she shot back, her voice breaking slightly. But it's like, somewhere along the line, I lost myself. Everything I did started feeling like it was for you, or us, or what you wanted. There wasn't room for me in my own life anymore. The words hit me like ice water, so starkly different from the warmth and affection she'd shown me for years. I felt my mind clawing for explanations, rewinding every interaction, every date, every night we'd spent together. Had it all been fake? Had I been nothing but an obligation to her? So this guy, he's what? Some way for you to feel like yourself again, I demanded, my voice cold. I hated the bitterness in my tone, but I couldn't stop it. Who is he, Hannah? Just some random guy you met when you needed a break from us. Her face softened just a bit, but it was enough for me to see the guilt hidden behind her anger. His name is Greg. We met at work, she confessed. It just happened. The words felt like salt on an open wound. It just happened, I repeated, shaking my head. So that's it. You just decided one day that he was what you needed, and I was what left in the dark, holding on to a lie. It wasn't like that, she said, her eyes pleading with me to understand. At first, I just needed someone to talk to, someone who didn't expect anything from me. But then it became something I didn't want to stop. He made me feel free, alive. She let out a shaky breath, her voice wavering. I don't expect you to understand. The irony was I did understand more than she probably realized. I'd known something had been off between us for months, but I had buried those doubts, told myself that we'd get back to what we used to be. I hadn't known that while I was struggling to keep us together, she was already halfway out the door. So, all those nights when you said you were tired or busy with work, you were with him, I said quietly, trying to keep my composure even as the anger simmered just beneath the surface. She didn't answer, but her silence was enough. My hands clenched, and I took a shaky breath, forcing myself to hold her gaze. And now? What happens now, Hannah? Her eyes darted away, and for a moment I thought she wouldn't answer. But then she straightened, meeting my gaze with a resolve I hadn't seen before. I don't know, she said honestly. I didn't plan on any of this. I never wanted to hurt you. But I also can't keep pretending that I'm happy, that I'm the person I was before. Her words stung in ways I couldn't have imagined. So you're saying I've been holding you back? That I'm the reason you're unhappy? She shook her head, sighing. No, it's not that simple. It's not about blame. But somewhere along the way I lost myself in us in trying to be what you wanted me to be. What I wanted you to be, I repeated, stunned. All I wanted was for you to be honest with me, to trust me. How am I supposed to believe anything you say now? The silence that followed was heavy, filled with all the things neither of us had the courage to say. I felt like I was staring at a stranger, someone I didn't know at all. And maybe that was the hardest part. That this woman, the one I'd loved and trusted with everything, was capable of such a betrayal. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft and full of regret. I never meant for it to end this way. I thought maybe we could find a way to fix things, but it doesn't feel like we're on the same path anymore. Because you chose a different path, I replied bitterly. You made that choice when you decided to go behind my back, to make me think I was the problem instead of just talking to me. She looked down, visibly struggling with her emotions, and for a fleeting moment, I could see the person I'd fallen in love with, the girl who used to laugh at my stupid jokes, who held my hand like she'd never let go. But that girl was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize, someone who had made choices I couldn't forgive. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. For everything. I could feel the weight of her apology, but it wasn't enough to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. It was like a weak echo, lost in the space we'd created through every lie, every act of betrayal. I couldn't look at her anymore. I need some time, I said, barely managing to keep my voice steady, to figure out what I'm supposed to do with all of this. She nodded, looking down at her hands, a ghost of guilt crossing her face. I understand, she whispered, as if that could make a difference. I turned to leave, but something held me back. I could feel the weight of her lies pressing on me, a mountain of betrayal that I couldn't carry alone anymore. I stopped, feeling the fury boiling beneath the hurt, the anger that she'd done this so easily, and all while dragging her friends Lisa and Claire into her lies. She'd not only betrayed me but woven a story that involved everyone around us. It wasn't just our relationship she'd tainted. It was the trust and loyalty of everyone who cared about her. Hannah was still standing there watching me when I made the decision. Without another word to her, I took out my phone, opened our group chat with Lisa and Claire, and sent a single message. You deserve the truth. I'm at the resort with Hannah, and it's not a girl's trip. Her face went pale as she watched me type, horror dawning in her eyes as she realized what I was doing. Please, don't drag them into this, she pleaded, reaching out as if she could stop me. They deserve to know what you've done, I said, my voice cold with finality. This whole thing, everything you've said to them, it was all a lie, and they should know that. I hit send and turned my back on her, leaving her standing in the hallway as my message was delivered. I didn't know if Lisa and Claire would respond right away or what they would think, but the truth was finally out there. The replies started coming in a few minutes later, one message after another expressing shock, anger, betrayal. I watched them roll in, and a bitter satisfaction settled over me. Hannah would finally have to answer to more than just me. Within the hour, Lisa and Claire arrived at the resort, and they wasted no time finding Hannah. From across the lobby, I saw them approach her, their expressions a mix of hurt and fury. I stayed back, watching as the woman I'd once loved struggled to explain herself to the people she'd used in her tangled web of lies. I didn't hear every word, but the tension was unmistakable as her friends demanded explanations she couldn't give. They had trusted her, stood by her through everything, only to find out she'd been manipulating their loyalty as a cover for a double life. Hannah's mask finally broke. The confident, controlled expression she'd kept up shattered as she faced the consequences of her choices. And as I watched her stumble through explanations, excuses, and weak apologies, I felt a strange peace settle over me. The truth was out there now, clear and undeniable, and she had no one left to hide behind. With one last look, I left the resort, the sound of her friends' angry voices echoing behind me. This time, as I walked away, I felt the weight lift. I'd held her secrets long enough, and now she would have to live with them.